Okay, forgive the wet hair, but I haven't been able to be bothered to use a blow dryer since 2020. I want to talk about what's going on in Ohio today. I'm really trying to limit my consumption of Epstein content and be really judicious in what I choose to share about the Epstein files right now. Is the information helping advance the cause of pursuing justice? Is it getting us closer to getting justice for Jeffrey Epstein's victims and dismantling the Epstein class? And I think today's story about what's happening in Columbus, Ohio with billionaire Les Wexner, I think it is important to cover it. So let's do it. Now, I went to high school in Beaver Creek, Ohio, and the majority of my high school class went to Ohio State. One of my best friends from high school still lives in the Columbus area. Actually, a lot of my friends from high school still live in Columbus. And so I try and keep tabs on politics in different parts of the country where I have friends and relatives, right? Kentucky, Indiana, St. Louis, Iowa, and Columbus. For people who aren't from Ohio, you might not know who Les Wexner is. He is a billionaire, and he was good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. His name is all over everything, right? He has his name on the front of the health clinic for Ohio State. Wexner made his billions because he's the co-founder of Bath & Body Works. He also is a principal for Abercrombie & Fitch, Victoria's Secret, and other corporations. And if your brain is like mine, going a million miles a minute, you might think, gosh, I remember hearing something about Abercrombie & Fitch and trafficking in the past. I know there's a connection there. Wexner, Abercrombie & Fitch, human trafficking. Oh, yeah. The CEO of Abercrombie & Fitch, Michael Jeffries, was indicted by the Department of Justice back in 2024 for human trafficking and prostitution. He trafficked young men all over the place, and the charges stem from 2008 and 2015 incidents. Now, he hasn't been brought to trial as of yet. In December of last year, a court was finally like, yeah, he's able to stand trial. So he hasn't been convicted yet, but he's been indicted. So something about the Epstein class, it's all billionaires, it's all super rich men in this country until proven otherwise. Okay, I promise we're going to get to the deposition of Les Wexner by members of Congress today. It's coming, but I think all of this context is really important. Now, like most super rich men, billionaire Les Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's good friend, Les Wexner, he cares about his legacy, right? These motherfuckers love to see their name up on the side of a building. They want to be commemorated in their lifetime and beyond. Donald Trump, desperate to have his name replace Penn Station, desperate to have Dulles Airport turned into Trump Airport, slapping his name up on the Kennedy Center like we're going to call it the Trump and Kennedy Center. No, we're not. It's the Kennedy Center. And Les Wexner is no different. He gave a bunch of money to Ohio State to have his name up on the medical center. But then, thanks to the work of investigative reporters looking through this latest dump of Epstein files, we found out that an OBGYN named Dr. Mark Landon, who works at that Les Wexner Medical Center at Ohio State, was on Jeffrey Epstein's payroll. Why would an OBGYN be on the payroll of a billionaire who is trafficking women and girls? I don't really want to get into all of the details here. I don't even think it's that necessary. We know that a doctor at a hospital named after Les Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's good friend, Les Wexner, that doctor was on the payroll of Jeffrey Epstein. All of these men, they're all interconnected. The cover-up is so much bigger than we realize. The influence peddling, the control of so many institutions is just it's so much bigger than we realize, which is, of course, why Les Wexner was being deposed today by members of Congress. So in terms of this Dr. Landon, we heard from WOSU Public Media yesterday that after tons of public pressure, after all of this Epstein information came out, Ohio State University is now investigating Dr. Mark Landon, who had what they call a working relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. According to emails and FedEx receipts and other documentation in the Epstein files, Jeffrey Epstein was paying Dr. Landon $75,000 a year. Now, Landon said in a statement that he never provided any clinical care for Epstein or his victims and that he had no knowledge of his criminal activities. Why would a billionaire need to keep the chair of Ohio State's Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology on his payroll if that doctor was providing no clinical care? He doesn't give any indication of what his legitimate services were that he provided for Jeffrey Epstein. Ohio State says that it is cooperating with Congress's investigation. And speaking of Congress's investigation, we heard late yesterday from Representative Ansari Hey everyone, back at the airport. I'm heading to Ohio right now because tomorrow we have a major deposition as part of the Oversight Committee's work into the crimes committed by Jeffrey Epstein. So tomorrow's deposition is actually with a man named, looking for my gate, a man named Les Wexner. If you haven't heard of Les Wexner, he is the former CEO of the L Brands, which was a massive retail conglomerate that owned Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, many other companies we're all very familiar with. He also had a decades-long financial and personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and he arguably is the person who is most responsible for Jeffrey Epstein's wealth, vast wealth of hundreds of millions of dollars, and therefore probably has information. And so we subpoenaed Les Wexner back in January. This was led by Oversight Democrats. And we want to know any and all information that he has, and he needs to answer our questions under oath. It'll probably take the entirety of the day tomorrow. And it's going to be a crucial component of this investigation, especially in light of the fact that his name came up many times in the files that the Department of Justice released. Now, that there has even been controversy around the fact that Les Wexner's name was redacted illegally as part of the botched release of the Epstein files, and we want to know why. But most importantly, I think somebody that knew Epstein for so long, and again was responsible for his wealth, certainly has some answers about who, may have been involved, what other rich and powerful men were part of these crimes or committed these crimes and abused and raped hundreds, if not thousands, of young women and girls. So jump to today, we have the deposition, and we are now hearing from Democrats in Congress how that went. You're not hearing from any Republicans because 0 Republicans showed up for the deposition. Not the chair of this committee, Jim Jordan, who is from Ohio. Jim Jordan has his own sex abuse cover-up scandal, by the way, also involving a doctor, also involving Ohio State. According to the victims of Dr. Richard Strauss, a physician at Ohio State for their athletic department, Jim Jordan, who was a wrestling coach there at the time, knew that the abuse was happening and he covered it up. Jordan has never faced consequences. And in case you're wondering about the scope of this abuse scandal, in 2020, Ohio State entered into a $40.9 million settlement with 182 abuse survivors. All of these men, right? Institutions, corporations, government, all connected. All of these men protect each other. So no Republicans showed up to this deposition today, but multiple Democrats did.
Let me tell you, the survivors have said over and over and over, follow the money. That was the one thing that they told us, as well as their attorneys. Follow the money. Well, we're following the money. But I'm going to be perfectly honest with you and tell you that we are running into dead ends at this moment. On yesterday, I was asked about this particular deposition and what I anticipated I would hear. As a trained attorney and litigator, once they told me he wasn't taking the fifth, I thought that the record would be full of I don't remembers. I will tell you that once this record comes out, you will see that you most likely will be left with more questions than answers.
I'm Dave Menn, freshman member of Congress out of Orange County, California, and before getting into office, I was a law professor. I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School, and earlier in my career, I was an SEC enforcement attorney, so I've done quite a few of these types of depositions and witness interviews. And while I don't want to comment on an ongoing deposition, we're going to go back in there and ask more questions, I can basically say that he has basically alleged that he saw no evil, heard no evil, despite being in the room with Jeffrey Epstein over and over and over. And it's really just not credible. I realize he's an elderly gentleman, memories fade, but the reputation of Jeffrey Epstein is very clear. Everyone around Jeffrey Epstein knew exactly what he's up to. And to spend that much time, to give that much trust to Jeffrey Epstein, and then to say, I don't remember seeing any young girls, I didn't hear anything about Jeffrey Epstein, it really is just not plausible. And so we're going to keep digging, but I want to just echo the comments earlier. This is a bit frustrating because we're not getting real answers to the questions that the American people deserve answers to. I also just want to give kudos to my colleagues behind me right here. Robert Garcia and the Democrats on the Oversight Committee have led the effort to try to expose this cover-up. What we've seen is foot dragging. We've seen, if you remember back to Pam Bondi saying that this was all a hoax and a cover-up, that there were no Epstein files. Due to the efforts of Ranking Member Garcia, we have been able to pierce that myth. We're getting more answers, but we've got a lot of work to do. And we'll just add, it is very frustrating the fact that there are no Republicans here today. I wish there were Republicans, because sex trafficking should not be a D versus R issue. It should be a bipartisan issue. Everybody should be invested in finding the truth right now. And the fact that we've had so little cooperation from the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, that the DOJ has actively tried to obstruct this investigation, that is shameful, and it will go down as a permanent mark on the records of people like Pam Bondi and Donald Trump. Now, I'll just close with this. When I got off the plane, I saw Wexner's name all over the place. His name is on buildings, it's on medical centers, and you immediately realize when you come to Columbus what a powerful individual this is. But I just want to say that no matter how rich or powerful you are, America stands for the principle that there's one rule of law that applies to anybody and everybody equally. And so whether Wexner is rich and powerful, whether Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump or Howard Lutnick are rich and powerful, should not matter. We're going to get the answers. People will be brought to justice. We will not rest until that happens.
Over the course of the last year, the American public has been witnessing what I can only call the most egregious cover-up in American history. And today was a critical part of our investigation to try to end this cover-up once and for all. We have met with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the rich and powerful people that helped to perpetuate these crimes. And we have heard over and over from these victims the name of Les Wexner and the importance of following the money. Because the story of Jeffrey Epstein is one that can almost, almost is the plot of a movie that is turned into a nightmare. And the real reason Jeffrey Epstein was able to get away with raping and abusing children, young women, boys, young men for so many years was because of the vast amounts of money that he was able to acquire, and that largely came from Les Wexner here in Ohio. So we're here to ask Les Wexner the critical questions, and it's been very interesting to see the types of responses that he's giving and his demeanor throughout the interview. He claims to want to provide information and to be helpful in the investigation, but then quickly follows up by saying that he does not recall details around a relationship with somebody that he had for decades. Les Wexner handed his power of attorney to Jeffrey Epstein. He allowed Jeffrey Epstein to live in his homes, to have hundreds of millions of his dollars, to use his yachts and his planes. This was obviously a very, very close relationship, and so far what we have seen is a denial of that relationship. Another important theme that has come up today is that Les Wexner is actually tied to other sex trafficking and child abuse scandals here in Ohio, around the country. There are reports of payments that were made to a gynecologist at Ohio State University, and that money went through Jeffrey Epstein but came from Les Wexner. And he has been asked about this with no real response, no recollection. And again, as my colleagues have said, I don't think it is feasible or understandable or conceivable that any individual would not have an understanding of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money and can't answer to those questions. So it is clear that this cover-up is vast. It goes as high as the White House and the Department of Justice, that still has not released the majority of the Epstein files, still has illegally redacted information, still has not begun any indictments or prosecutions for the very credible allegations that are in the files that we already have seen, all the way to people at universities, in companies, and vast networks of elite individuals across this country. And what I can tell you very clearly is that oversight Democrats on this committee will not back down until we get every detail, until every person who enabled and perpetrated these crimes is held accountable.
So that's sort of the state of play of things right now. And I just really want to encourage you, if you are looking at all of this unfolding with the Epstein files and you just feel completely overwhelmed, it feels like this is so much bigger than we realize. The cover up is so much more massive. So many more powerful people, and not even that powerful people, have benefited from and participated in not only trafficking, but the cover up afterward. If it feels like the corruption is so massive, we're never going to get justice. I would really encourage you to look at the trajectory of the investigation just since May of last year. Keep in mind that Epstein had been doing this since the 90s. This cover-up had been ongoing. The crimes had been ongoing since the 90s. Tips had been coming in since the 90s. Millions and millions and millions of files, y'all, over the last decades. The Bush administration, Obama, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, their administrations are all responsible for not doing due diligence. They didn't want to touch it, right? They didn't want to touch it because wealthy, powerful people. But it was public pressure from us, right? The government was never going to pursue justice on its own. But because of overwhelming public pressure from us, the American people, since May of last year, this case has started blowing wide open. I am more convinced than ever that we are going to get justice for Epstein's victims and that we are going to get significant, serious reforms to make sure that this doesn't happen again. I feel like personally we are on the cusp. If we continue to drive things in this direction, we are on the cusp of having significant reforms that make sure that these kind of men no longer can have that amount of wealth and power and be able to victimize regular people in the way that they have been doing for decades. This all feels really, really terrible right now, but this is a moment where we can decide we're not fucking doing this anymore as a society. We can get the kinds of reforms and guardrails and controls and tax the shit out of these motherfuckers and change our laws and make sure that the prosecutions happen and we enact justice. And today I am more confident than ever that we are on that path.